Greetings, this is Brother Willie Muhammad with National Network View. On tonight's broadcast, Dr. Gary Clark and Sister Sadiyah Karriem will discuss the constant injustices being committed by police against Black people in America. Later in the show, our guests will discuss the former Buffalo, New York police officer Carole Horne and her 13-year battle after being terminated and denied her pension for intervening and stopping a police officer who was using excessive force against a Black man. Lastly, our guests will discuss the closing arguments in the Derek Chauvin trial. But before we delve into those topics, we're going to spend some time and recap on the current events that were covered this week. On yesterday, I have a testimony. I had the opportunity to interview Chuck D, the lead rapper of Public Enemy, and he addressed a wide range of social and political issues that were relevant to the Black community. What would you say about has been the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's impact on the hip hop music?
That he's humble, great voice, his tone is penetrating, and you add some knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to that, it's going to touch your soul. I don't think a lot of people, even if they say the same thing the minister says, he's gifted with a tone. I don't think a lot of people also talk about his tonality. His tone is very musical. It's very soothing yet penetrating. And when you add, a word of God or whatever you want to believe to that, yeah. Very few people have that, Brother Willie. If they might have the words, they might even have the diction, but they even might have the flow, but the minister has all those things, and he got the flow, the diction, the word, the truth in the word, and he's got the tone, just the right voice. In hip hop and rap, people will talk about Jay-Z, it's flow, but he has a tone, the tone. And this is why the minister said it's very important for artists to kind of say some of the right things. And if you can't say the right things, point to people who are doing the right things. Not everybody's equipped to have the mic. And when you get the mic, you got to move something.
NNV contributor Charles Muhammad gave us some tips on how to eat to live and the best fish to eat.
All right, Brother Charles, for our pescatarians and our fish eaters, where will fish be in the future of food?
Well, there's a saying that there's plenty of fish in the sea. And we don't really understand how vast the oceans and the seas are that can hold fish. And 3.5 billion people have fish as their source of food. And that seems to is going to double within the next 10 years to 7 billion. So fish is going to remain on the menu for the majority of the planet. So be happy that this is a food supply that seems to be unlimited if we treat our water sources properly. Fish will be with man for a long time.
And Salil Muhammad appeared on the El Asa report with Brother Robert Muhammad, where Brother Salih talked about the Black and the brown young men who've been murdered at the hands of law enforcement here in America.
Looking at this past year, during the pandemic, we know that our brother George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin, and he's on trial right now. Considering the response, not just from Black, brown, and white Americans, but the disapproval from people all over the planet, what happens if Derek Chauvin is acquitted of murder?
I don't know. I don't know what happens, but I know what should happen. The truth of the matter is, if we look at the past history, this isn't the first time that a Black man has been murdered on national and international television only for the officer to get away. And it may not be the last. What we do know is that the way we ensure our slain do not die in vain is that we must take action upon or after these incidents occur. The fact of the matter is, we don't know what will happen, but we know it should happen. We know what the solution is.
Brother Salil also discussed Black independent education and also the new education paradigm in the 21st century.
Why is there a need to have a new educational paradigm in the 21st century?
Yes, sir. Well, that's simple because it's terrible. The current paradigm of education is absolutely terrible. And there is not one iota of evidence anywhere that suggests that education in the United States of America works. It doesn't work. We need not look further than ourselves. Go and ask yourself and look in the mirror and really question whether or not you understood what you read or what you heard today. Go and ask yourself whether or not you learned that's what you needed that can make you a free and independent person. That's a simple question. It's terrible. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us you need not condemn a dirty glass, just put a clean glass next up to it.
NMB reporter Nina Shabazz discussed how our brothers and sisters in the Muslim community globally are dealing with the difficult situations within the pandemic.
What is the general mood of the people that he has encountered there?
Well, the general mood, from what I had a discussion with him, you know, people are hurting, you know, people are, you know, they are walking in a little bit more fear. As with the previous administration, they, a lot of the hope that they had, you know, during President Obama's tenure was completely lost during the previous administration. I mean, we see the lines, we see that, and this is, I mean, we saw lines like this here in America. And can you imagine, you know, essentially being cut off from all other countries being able to trade with you, and that essentially cripples your community. And so the mood is somber. The mood is, you know, they're desperate. But now I think with this new administration, there's a little glimmer of hope that things may return, and, you know, Americans can travel there a little bit more. And so that's the hope.
Ipi Adukan, who is the CEO and founder of World Apparel Company, discussed his clothing line that is providing youth opportunities and helping them to raise money and support the world missions.
What portion of these proceeds from the sales of our clothing line go to help support charities? And give us a few examples of charities that we've helped in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. So 100%. Me, myself, the team, Tariq, Mr. A. Chambers, none of us have pocketed a dime from anything that we've sold, or made, or was given to us by charity from another, you know, org that wanted to help, or another business that wanted to help. None of it has been pocketed. We don't believe in that. This is 100% nonprofit. I don't pay myself. I work a 9 to 5. Sorry, that's how I pay myself. But as far as the projects that we've done, so I'll start from the beginning. First one was Promise House Orphanage, Dallas, Texas. We raised a couple $100, not much, not many. I think it was $500. That's what we raised probably, and we spent $300 of it on toys and coloring books and video games for the kids that Christmas. And we gave the Promise House a check of $200 for them to purchase, you know, any type of miscellaneous things that they needed for the kids.
World Apparel Company supports a variety of charities to support the needy and those in the community.
How did we show? What's an example of how we show that, you know, it doesn't take an enormous amount of money or sponsorships to help to bring a program to life, to put on an event, and also give back to the community as well?
Yeah, I want to say the best way we showed it was being transparent, and actually starting. That would be my answer, especially for anyone that is young and feel like they don't have the resources to do it. Just start with what you have. I honestly believe that God gives us everything that we need. So where you at right now, God is giving you everything that you need, and you should be able to produce with that, because it's the fruits that it's the seeds that He's giving you, and He wants you to produce fruit with it. So I believe we did a real good job of doing that early on. Yeah, it's going to take sacrifice. It's not going to be looked as the coolest thing at the time, because the cool way to do it is wait till you become a millionaire or make thousands of dollars, then start giving to the needy and in the community. But we took a different route. We said, why does that have to be the norm? You know, why can't we just do it the other way? And we did. And we've been very successful with it. And it's been, I love it every day. I think about it every day, what we do, and I love it.
Tony Muhammad discussed the history of colonialism in Myanmar, the country formerly known as Burma.
The ousted leader, where is she? Has she fled the country?
According to the reports, they are all on house arrest, but there are no secret court that we know of in regards to their trial. According to the BBC, Ms. Kia originally faced 2 charges of illegally importing radio and communication devices, violating Myanmar's emergency COVID-19 laws. But a further 2 charges were later added. She was accused of using illegal communication equipment and causing fear and alarm, violating the National Disaster Act. That's according to the military. So as to that, we could just say that was the justification. As to what exactly is really taking place,
right?
I think time will tell exactly what exactly is taking place.
Tamia Martin Bay and Kiara Adams with Compton Community Garden shared how the community garden is positively impacting and strengthening the community.
Okay. I wanted to know how long has the community garden been operating?
So the community garden has been operating since 2013. It started with Dr. Ross, our mentor that you've seen in the previous video. He worked with this organization to actually create the space here, along with about 14 other community gardens in Los Angeles. And the goal with creating Compton Community Garden was actually to combat obesity and food insecurity in our neighborhoods. And from there, he partnered with at-risk youth to get them involved and give them something productive to do in the community. Yeah. And that's when our organization, Holistic Divine Innovations, came on board to actually help sustain the place and add organization and structure to what you guys all see now as the garden. Yeah.
Brother Abdul Malik Muhammad, the top fisherman in the Nation of Islam, discussed the death of Malcolm X and others not long after receiving a COVID-19 vaccine. And he also talked about how people can rise above the drug addiction with prayer and fasting.
How did you make it out? Was it, in fact, the minister who encouraged you or inspired you to get out of the drug trap?
Miss Louis Farrakhan is the reason I got out of drugs, gang banging, womanizing, and everything that the Black community was doing. I was a part of that. It was a fun thing, but the Minister Farrakhan's word went out and did not come back void when it took place in Brother Warren 2X at that time's heart, who I'm now, Abdul Malik. Minister Farrakhan is the only solution. He showed me the power of prayer and fasting, and if the people are not making 5 prayers a day and fasting, you need to rush yourself to the hospital. The hospital is prayer and fasting, the foundation to success. And you should, and if I can give them the number to it, they could definitely have that too. But they need to rush to the hospital. If you're not making 5 prayers a day and doing some type of fasting with all these chemicals in the food that we're taking, you better come on with it and come up out of that situation. It helped me.
We were also joined by our sister Charlene Muhammad, as you're going to see in this next clip.
Can you speak on the significance of blood clots, or just the significance of this particular side effect in relationship to the vaccine?
Sure. This side effect, the one that has been reported for AstraZeneca, which is also the same side effect that's being reported for Johnson & Johnson, causes blood drainage from the brain. And there's also reports that it causes clotting in the abdomen. And at least 18 of AstraZeneca's reporting, 18 people have died. That's as of last week. We don't know what the numbers are today, but it's very serious. Blood clotting is serious, but this is drainage from the brain. There have been reports of people who have experienced clotting saying they have excruciating headaches, like beyond migraine headaches. So it's deadly. It can be very deadly.
And dear brothers and sisters, and we thank you all. And we're going to pause for these brief announcements. But when we return, we're going to be joined with our monthly contributors, Sister Sadiyah, Karriem, and Dr. Gary Clark, who's going to talk about a wide variety of issues when we return.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sadiyah Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sadiyah House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sadiyahhouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
While America is awaiting a verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial, we're still seeing the media filled with various stories concerning more injustices that are taking place in America towards Black people.
The police, why don't they open their eyes to what the public relations are? They've got to stop this stuff.
Yes, that is televangelist Pat Robertson, and even he is now hammering police.
We don't have the finest in the police department. We cannot have a bunch of clowns running around who are underpaid and who really are not the best and brightest.
Robertson spoke about the killing of George Floyd and trial of Derek Chauvin.
This thing is going on in Minnesota, but the Derek Chauvin, I mean, they ought to put him under the jail. He has caused so much trouble.
Get out of the car now! The assault of Lieutenant Carole Horne.
The police in Virginia picked up a lieutenant in the Army.
Hold on. Watch it.
Our state police are highly trained, but why they don't stop this?
And Robertson addressed the shooting death of Dante Wright.
He shot that poor guy to death, saying, "This is what I thought. I thought was my taser." And if you can't tell the difference in the feel of those things, it's crazy.
Crazy. And Robertson himself has been called crazy. So if he thinks these police actions are nuts, you know it must all be beyond the pale.
So we're here with our guests, Sister Sadiyah, Karriem, and our brother Dr. Gary Clark. And I'll start with you, Sister Sadiyah, then we go to Brother Gary Clark, Dr. Gary Clark. So why do you think we are continue to see and witness these assaults against Black people in America, not only from law enforcement, but even from regular white folks who have no authority at all? You're on mute, sis. You're on mute.
So it's business as usual, you know, with modern day technology. What we're seeing now is what was being these atrocities that were being enacted on Black people, you know, for centuries. So it's just a modern day lynching, but now that we have technology backing it up. So if we look historically, what would happen, back in the early 1800s, the 1900s, we had these lynchings that would call out a gathering of people. People would pack up their children. I mean, you would have large assemblies to witness these mass killings. And so now with social media and technology, we're just seeing what has been always happening. And now we just have to speak to the truth of it. And I believe that the media, the way that the media is portraying this, is desensitizing those behind the scenes with their guns. And then with us, it's, you know, the Willie Lynch mentality, putting us in our place and giving us the fear that the intention was there from the very beginning, is to put fear and to cull a population.
Wow, thank you, Sister. Dr. Clark, what are your thoughts?
Sister Sadiyah, I mean, my goodness, always on point, absolutely correct. And brother Willie, I want to say as well, thanks for having me today. But you know what? This is what Black America knows and Brown America knows, and this is what. If you're a minority in this majority culture, it's what we recognize. This is nothing new whatsoever. But what's happening now is that those who are part of the majority culture, they are seeing it to some extent for the first time. Many of whom, for some of whom, their experience with people of color is very limited. But then there are others who there's a fraction of the population where they know the absolute truth. You know, there was something stated years ago. One of the great football coaches said, "We are what our record says it is." But guess what? America, this is not, when people say this is not America, this is America. This is who America says it is. This is who we are. And so, but we have to recognize the nature of the DNA of this society, that we've got to come back things that you recognize that exist within your DNA and your character. If you know that that alcoholism runs in your DNA, then you've got to do things to fight against it. If you know there are certain addictions that run in your DNA that predisposes you to certain activities, then you know you must come back against it. We recognize the nature of the inception of the development of this society, so therefore we have to work to make sure that we fight against the sort of corruption and the wars you have and assaults you have against people and women of color, men, women, black, brown, yellow, whomever.
Yes, sir. And attorney, Sister Sadiyah, I'm trying to say attorney, but Sister Sadiyah, that's what I'm gonna stick with, right? So we saw right in Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis, there was a 20-year-old Dante Wright. He was shot by the police officer, and she said that she made a mistake, and they gave her the charge of second-degree manslaughter. So from an attorney's perspective, do you think that that charge was fitting? And also, what are your thoughts about her saying she made a mistake?
Well, she was an officer, I believe, over 20 years. And so she's trying to use the argument that it was weapon confusion, but there is no weapon confusion when you are a 20-plus-year veteran officer. And that weapon that she used was way heavier than an actual taser. So we know they're already framing the argument to justify that homicide. Now, if you look at, and as we were talking about earlier, the history of America, that particular town in particular, a historic note, the founder of that town was a well-known KKK, Sheriff Earl Brown. And not only was he the sheriff of that particular county, the same county that the Derek Chauvin trial is a part of right now, but also he was the founder of the Minnesota State Troopers Department, and then the vice president as well of the Eugenics Society. So saying that the racist, the systemic racism in that particular area, especially with law enforcement, is very deep, is very heavy. So, you know, I just say that as a historic note, but were the charges appropriate? You know, the goal is to make sure that she's convicted. So I'm going to say, yes, the charges were appropriate to what we can use. But as in the Derek Chauvin trial that we'll see, was reasonable force used? And based on the totality of circumstance, I believe she'll get off.
Wow. And so Dr. Clark, you have a specialty in dealing with politics, and you teach political science there at Dillard University, which is an HBCU in the city of New Orleans. What courses of action, if there are any politically, that Black politicians can use to reduce or even eliminate these type of incidents from happening?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because when you look at it you can look at it through the lens of the legal lens, or you can look at it through the lens of criminal justice. But when you view it from a political perspective, which is about the allocation and distribution of power, which is what politics is all about itself. And so it's about acquiring power. Where does it begin? It begins, I hate to be so broad, but I have to narrow it down. It comes down to what we are being confronted with now over the course of the next few months that's coming into play. The reapportionment. We've got to put people in office. We have to redesign and restructure the congressional district and the municipality district, the very narrow political subdivisions. We got to put people in power and in office. That is where power comes from in the United States. And so once we begin to get political power, and then you can restructure and you can begin to shape the policies of the day. But let me just say this very quickly. I don't necessarily look at the system itself in terms of the failure of this aspect or the failure of that aspect. I look at who you bring into the system and who you bring in as a police officer. You want good lawyers, got to bring people into the legal profession. You want good folks who are going to be good police officers, give them psychological tests. Forget about all this other et cetera about the training and whatever. I served for a number of years on the Louisiana State Police Commission. I was chairman of the Louisiana State Police Commission here in Louisiana. And the one thing that I always talked about was not about the training and all of that. That's great. But the psychological exam. Everyone should not be carrying a gun, a weapon. You see, everyone is not psychologically prepared for that and should not do it. So let's go to the front end, and then you can begin to shape the policies and all these other et cetera that go along with it.
And Sister Sadiyah, you mentioned a point about how what we're seeing has always been happening, but now we have it on video. And when I think about that, it's not frightening, but like, imagine if there was no camera, George Floyd would have been just be dead. George Floyd, all of the others. So what are your thoughts about that? How now with these cameras they're being these incidents are being able to be brought to a court of law, but how many people are experiencing this that are not caught on camera?
Oh, a tremendous amount. And now where you're seeing the law enforcement, they confiscate the cameras when they come to the scene because they know that automatically that's the thing that we do. But through the grace of God, those who do get on film and that we do see socially or on the media is because they were very vigilant. But, most of the officers who commit police brutality or kill individuals, they do not get convicted. And so, again, this is a modern day lynching. And then I think, again, there's a segment where, the media wants us to see this so that we can be more desensitized by what we're seeing so that it can happen more and then nothing be done.
And Dr. Clark, as a professor on the campus of an HBCU, what impact are you seeing that these incidents are having on the student body? Is it making them more conscious, or they just like, that don't have nothing to do with me?
Oh, no. Well, see, again, at my particular university, Dillard University in New Orleans, I'm flying, and we're in the city of New Orleans, a port city. And port cities, no matter where they are in the world, can very well be, they're great cities, they're fun cities, but they're very diverse cities. And if you're not careful, they can be a dangerous city. I talk to the first and second year students when they come to the campus, and I see them ask them, how many of you have been stopped by a police officer? What do you do? In fact, we used to hold sessions about what to and what not to do if you are stopped by a police officer, because we don't want you to get in trouble in the city. We don't want you to be a statistic. And this is not 5, 10, this is 20 years ago. We were doing this in the political science area and political science department. But let me say this, what I feel and see from this generation of students, they are highly aware. They do understand what is taking place. They come from a position of power and authority. They come from a position where they want to actually be in the front lines, and they demand that they are at the front lines. And so this is a different sort of generation. And not to say that they're different from the others, but there's a certain heightened awareness that they have. And Dillard University is a private college, and so to some extent, many of the kids they come from very, very good backgrounds. And I say good background; they come from a different socio-economic status per se, and they're very diverse. But they come knowing that they need to be participants in the process. And in fact, they also come from various positions.
Yes,
and, that we should be aware of. They're not all monolithic in terms of how you should approach the police. Yes, sir. So we're approaching our first break, but we're going to be back with our contributors, and we're going to talk about this battle by this sister, I'm going to say Officer Horne, when we get back after this break.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
So over 13 years later, a former Buffalo, New York police officer who's now being reinstated, Officer Carole Horne, has finally been given justice for her heroic actions. I want to say that again, heroic actions, because she prevented a black man from becoming another hashtag by intervening when this white officer was using excessive force. Check the clip out.
Carole Horne was dismissed from the Buffalo, New York Police Department after she intervened when a white officer used a chokehold on a black man. This was back in 2006. Now a judge has decided to reverse Horne's termination and reinstate her pension. Jerika Duncan spoke to Horne about why she kept fighting all these years.
Carole Horne never stopped believing in the justice system.
Did you ever think this day would come? I did think this day would come. That's why I kept fighting.
Horne's story goes back almost 15 years. In 2006, the former Buffalo, New York police officer made headlines after she tried to stop fellow officer Greg Kwiatkowski from choking a black suspect, Neil Mack. Horne says she was struck in the face by Kwiatkowski at the time.
Get off of him now!
This past summer, after watching George Floyd's breath slip away under the knee of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, Horne recalled why she intervened.
Neil Mack looked like he was about to die. So had I not stepped in, he possibly could have. He was handcuffed and being choked.
So Dr. Clark, what are your thoughts about that, hearing that story? Because I learned about it this week.
Well, the way it stands that if not for the heroic efforts of Officer Horne, Neil Mack would be another hashtag. That we will be using right now. Another name in a long line of individuals who have lost their lives through the authorities. But you know something? Is Frederick Douglass once said, you have to agitate. You have to always be there and don't give up. But when I look at what Officer Horne has done, is what I believe. And that is that you got to fight this. There's a war out there. You have to fight this war from the inside and from the outside. You have to fight it with everything that you have. She was on the inside, and she made an ethical decision from the inside to do everything that she could to protect not just someone who was a part of our community, who was one of us, but a fellow human being. And which is what she did. And as a result of that, there's a law named after her. People recognize the fact that the people in Buffalo, the Buffalo authorities, the council members there recognize that they made a mistake and they've apologized, and more so than that, and they've announced their disapproval of chokeholds and all these other activities that go along with arresting individuals and the use of physical force. They're going against that. When they're trying to effect an arrest. And so what we find is that but Officer Horne, there's something which I think is morally, ethically, and responsible. Something that many of us, that we would ask ourselves, what would you do? You would hope that someone would intervene to save your life, my life, the life of a loved one, the life of anyone we do not know, would intervene to protect that particular person. And it's good that she was there on the inside. And my final statement regarding that is that I recall that she lost her pension, but then the judge ruled that she can get her pension back. And but I have a grandfather in the last century. He worked for 25, 30 years for Standard Oil. Standard Oil is big here in the state of Louisiana and in Texas too. And so what happened is that he worked for 25, 30 years, and just a few months before his pension came, they let him go. He was a black person of color. But down the road, people formed that class action lawsuit against that particular practice and stopped it. And so it's good to have someone such as such what Officer Horne did.
And that's Sister Sadiyah. And Sister Sadiyah, also, you can chime in on that question as well. But also, what other, she's going to get, like Dr. Clark mentioned, she's going to get a pension, she's going to get back pay. What other legal actions can she take?
Well, she went a step further, as Dr. Clark stated, by codifying, making sure that there's intervention when officers see their fellow officers using excessive force. And so that is a big deal, because not only did it was codified in Buffalo, but that particular law is being duplicated all over the nation. So good job, Officer Horne. And, you know, timing is everything. And she reminds me of the woman in the Bible who kept going back and back and back to the judge, asking for justice and mercy. And so, you know, unfortunately, you know, we had to see what happened with George Floyd. But when she saw that happen to George Floyd, as a mother, as a Black woman, she knew that she had to make sure that she continued the fight and continued to cry out against this injustice. And so, you know, through this particular woman, you know, be the will of God, this whole blue wall of silence may be eradicated and may be torn down. And when I say the blue wall of silence, or the blue code, or the blue silence, it is this code that officers have, that when there's misconduct, they do not snitch on each other. They do not, you know, call it out. And so they'll feign ignorance, or they'll perjure themselves in order to protect that which is wrong. And so good job. This is what you call an example of a good officer who has compassion and humanity. And that's what the police departments need.
All right. And Doc, Sister Sadiyah mentioned the blue wall of silence. If this is this law, the Carrie's law, is implemented nationally, and both of you all can still respond to this, do you think it has the strength to penetrate that blue wall of silence? Because we've seen federal, I forgot what they call it, when the federal government comes over and takes over the police force and all of these other pieces of legislation and reforms, but the behavior stays the same. So do you think it can penetrate that blue wall of silence?
Absolutely. It's all about generations. Once we got this generation of police officers out of there, they retire, they leave. There are those who say they want to quit, but quit, goodbye. And we don't want you. And so if we bring in individuals who have high quality and high standards, yes, it's going to change. And I have the faith, when you look at all these externals that we have around us, that and the pressure that we're putting out there, that there's going to be a change in the police officers. And my final statement regarding that is, as a professor, I've taught many individuals who've gone into a police force in the city of New Orleans and elsewhere, and they're high, and they've moved up the ranks, and they're highly qualified, good and decent men and women. So I know that there are going to be some changes.
So as we get ready, because we're approaching our next break soon, what can we do? Like, we know this, I think it's maybe only about 3 or 4 states where that law has been accepted, right? Like, what can others who are in states where this law has not been accepted, what can they do to help to make that law get established here in like I said, for example, Louisiana or even in Texas? We'll start with you, Sister Sadiyah, then we'll go to Dr. Clark before the break.
I mean, you need people like Officer Horne. You need politicians. You need somebody at the forefront of this, going to every state legislative body, and then Biden as well, enact some type of federal law as well. And then also, we talk about qualified immunity with these officers. When officers commit unconstitutional acts or commit police brutality against these people, what happens is they hide behind qualified immunity because they're saying what they did was within the law. So if qualified immunity was taken away and these officers financially, because we can't bring the life back, but financially cannot hide behind non-liability and feel the brunt of the punishment of going to jail, feel the brunt of the economic loss, the economic damages, then, I believe these officers will come step forward and say, oh no, because self-preservation is the first thing, and they don't want to lose their self-preservation.
What did you say, Dr. Clark?
And there's something else that these officers have, and that is they have the qualified immunity, all those other good things, but they also have an apparatus that protects them, the police unions, and the police unions exist. And they already know. Let's say if you and I say we go out there and do something that's wrong, we know we have an organization that's going to put money behind us, no matter whether we're right or wrong, and they're going to support us regardless. And so, hey, we know that there's a parachute, and they know that there's a golden parachute there, and they also know that there's a fraternity that exists. That hey, if they do something wrong in one community, they can just go in our state, go into the next parish, or in other areas, go to the next county, and get another job with in policing. And so, yes, we've got to pay attention to those unions, and they've got to understand that the unions must have some degree of moral responsibility for what they do.
I had the opportunity to speak with Brother Captain Dennis Muhammad, who has a wealth of experience with dealing with police officers of this law enforcement. He made a good point. Like we saw in Minnesota when the lady shot Dante White, the chief resigned. But he talked about how we should also see those people who are responsible for training these officers. Like the chief may resign, but the person who's responsible for training this the 26-year-old veteran or whatever, they're still on the force, right? So quickly, what do you think your thoughts about that? Should more focus also be put on the people who was the immediate trainers, a field officer, whatever they call them?
Well, you have to clean the whole organization up. Of course, it starts from the top. The top was complicit by allowing their subordinates to allow these acts or have this particular type of culture. But you got to clean the entire organization. And as Dr. Clark said, you have to start with a group of different individuals who psychologically will do the right thing. And so, the police departments in America, are inherent and was created on a white supremacist platform. We know that if we look at the history of the institution of police departments, it was slave patrol, really. And so it's rooted in something that is ugly. And of course, as Dr. Clark talked about, we got to get a new generation, and you have to clean up and get a mop to clean the dirty cops.
Get a mop to clean the dirty cops. So briefly, Dr. Clark, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, again, I like the fact that Sister Sadiyah always places everything in a historical context. And what happens again is that, yes, we know that the reform is needed, the reform is necessary, all that's is great, and that's what should take place. But we have to have the mechanism that we have individuals who can come in and fill the void. So we have to begin to train folks about policing. We got to begin to train folks about protecting and change our philosophy about what policing itself is all about, and for it not to be so injurious period when you go out there and go into a community. And that's what's necessary. We want all of these things to say that when I'm gone and I'm dust, and the ones that come after us say, did that really happen? Was America really like that? And they say, oh, but America has changed fundamentally. And it is going to change fundamentally. I guarantee you. Well, you and I may not see that day, but when America becomes brown and black and dominated, you're going to see a whole different America. and a whole different concept about how America is going to operate. And that's what we're going through right now. Is this evolution and it's growth.
Yes, sir. Great points made by both of you all. So we're coming up to our next break, and when we return, we're going to talk about, you're going to hear our contributors give their thoughts about the closing arguments for this Derek Chauvin trial. We'll be right back. NNV Network.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story report honors the spirit and the life of the great DMX. Earl Simmons, better known as DMX, has passed away. The acronym DMX stands for Dark Man X. The great rapper, songwriter, and actor will be missed. He was the first artist to debut an album at #1 5 times in a row on the Billboard charts. Overall, DMX has sold over 74 million records worldwide. His music inspired countless fans across the world. He was nothing less than a giant. The FCN Volume Number 28 edition features the middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. The message delivers words of comfort and care as we mourn the loss of DMX. To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the NNVnews.com Final Call cover report.
This is Sister Sadiyah Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sadiyah House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sadiyahhouse.com.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
So on last week, the defense for Derek Chauvin rested their presentation, or their arguments, and today America has got the opportunity to witness the prosecution and the defense give their last closing arguments about the Derek Chauvin trial.
Okay. Put them on your head. The defense opens with this police video. George Floyd, the passenger during a traffic stop in 2019. Don't you jerk away from me. The officer at the time, Scott Creighton, he's the first witness.
The passenger was unresponsive and non-compliant to my commands.
You told him to undo his seatbelt, correct?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
And he did that, right?
Yes, he did.
The prosecution during cross quickly and directly pointing to a difference between the stop and the day Floyd died.
And Mr. Floyd didn't drop dead while you were interacting with him, correct?
No.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the defense calls Peter Chang.
Calling officers and a paramedic to the witness stand, the defense gets straight to key elements of its strategy: Floyd's health and drug use.
He told me that he had been taking multiple, like every 20 minutes.
Wow. So let's start with you, Sister Sadiyah. Do you think the defense's counter arguments were strong enough to cast doubt in the mind of jurors?
So you have to look at the make of the jurors rather. And so I believe it's 6 white, 4 African American, and then 2 who say that they are biracial. And ultimately, those are the individuals are going to decide whether there was enough reasonable doubt. Enough evidence to convict Derek Chauvin. Now, you have to look at the background of these individuals. But, did the defense prove its case? The defense doesn't have to prove its case. It's not on the defense to prove their case. It's on the prosecutors to prove their case. Was the evidence overwhelming for the prosecutors? Yes, absolutely. I think the defense arguments were very weak. They tried to say it was because of his health condition, that he had complications with his heart, that he had drug in his system. But all of the expert witnesses on the prosecutor's side, and even the expert witness on the defense, they had to acknowledge that it was a constriction of air, and it was due to due to the unreasonable force that Officer Derek Chauvin placed on the George Floyd's neck. So the defense argument was very weak. It was very flimsy, I believe. I believe they were reaching and grasping at straws. And if you can't convince them, you try to confuse them. But the prosecutors were very, very adamant to stay focused that he would not have died but for Officer Chauvin placing his knee on his neck and constricting his airways.
That helps. That what you said about if you can't convince them, confuse them, it helps me understand why they were trying to like they tried to say like the carbon monoxide that came out of the tailpipe. I was like, wow, really?
But there
serious?
was no evidence to even prove that, right? From that particular expert witness. He had to agree he didn't see any evidence. And they came back and countered and said that his oxygen was 98% saturation, which meant that was a futile argument.
Wow, that's crazy. What do you say, Doc, about the defense's attempt?
Well, Sister Sadiyah, and she's an attorney, highly trained, a lawyer. Yes, you know, she sees things I don't see. So I'm going to give you the perspective from my perspective, and I think that looking at it from the outside as not a professional, seeing how the prosecutors laid this thing out, laid the case out, it was academic. It was beyond an academic performance. It was from my perspective, it was professorial. It was a teaching experience. It was one that when it was ABC, subset. It was outstanding. But what got to me, and what I found to be very, 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 very substantive, was the closing argument by the prosecution when they said that, and you all are individuals of faith, men and women of faith. They said, look, right here, all of these individuals came together, and here it is where Floyd did not know anyone, but yet these individuals came together at one time, one place, in a moment of time, and they all were there to document, to codify, to see what is taking place, and these folks wanted to protect this man's life, and they were brought together for a reason. And it was God that brought them together, so that everyone can see what is taking place, not in Minnesota, which was a state from the historical perspective. We know how that state came to be, and Minnesota, but Minnesota represents a microcosm of America's jurisprudence. And so this is the statement to me that was important and necessary, and the fact that all these people came together to witness this and make this a moment that the world recognize and see.
Wow. So as we're doing this show right now, the jury, I don't know the actual legal terminology, they're deliberating. You said, right? So I'll start with you all, from just put it on record. What do you think? And I'll start with Sister Sadiyah, then we'll come back to Dr. Clark. Do you think he's going to be convicted from your perspective? I know you don't have a crystal ball or anything.
No, I don't have a crystal ball. I do believe that the evidence was overwhelming on behalf of the prosecutor's side. However, we've seen time and time again, when there's overwhelming evidence. I've been a part of trials where there's overwhelming evidence and the verdict comes out differently. That's why right now we see that law enforcement and National Guards, they're all preparing for what's going to happen when this verdict comes out. And of course, either side, if they're not happy, they have an opportunity and I have a right to appeal the decision. I'm hopeful that the right thing will be done and he will be convicted and he will go to jail. However, there's a other part of me where this is America. So we don't know.
That's a good point. What did you say, Dr. Clark? Guilty? Would he be found guilty or innocent?
Again, I hate to be like, I'm somewhat jaded. And I'm from the been there, done that school. We've been there, we've done that, we've seen this before. And by the same token, we want to see that policing is on trial. And there are those who want to place policing on trial because policing is on trial. And if the general public, the authorities know and understand that if policing fails, that there could be an all-out disruption of what takes place. They know and understand that if policing fails, that those of us who are part of the minority community, the African American community, and people of color, that those individuals who are factions within that community may indeed engage in an assault on the system. But guess what? Let's just say if this case falls right, and we discover that the verdict is flipped, and they also know and recognize that those who come from the right wing, those militias, and that's why it kept secret. That what will those militias do? And they come armed. They come armed with all sorts of military weapons, and so the preparation is not just for people of color, but it's also for those right wingers out there.
Wow. And so and I think that's a good question. Let's talk about that. So, because either way, they're concerned that if he's found innocent, they're concerned about the Black community, and then there's some people if he's found guilty, then what about the militia? So what are your thoughts about that, Sister Sadiyah? And then we'll go back to Dr. Clark and close out.
Oh, we're in the middle of a keg right now, and it's waiting to explode. Because you're absolutely right. You know, it's ripe for a race war, honestly, just to be truthful about it. We saw what happened in the Capitol when they thought that their president was going to be out. And so they came from the darkness and came into the light and let us see who they truly were. And so a lot of them were officers. A lot of them were law enforcement. And so to see Derek Chauvin, criminal Derek Chauvin, to not get justice in their eyes, it's going to be something to see. And I'm trying to use my words carefully, if you can't tell, but it's not going to be a good situation for neither side. Let me say that.
That's true. What do you say, Doc?
Well, exactly. And so America now is again, we're living through a period. We're fortunate enough that you have the kind of minds like the show that you present here. You have the mature minds. You have not only intellectuals, but you have practitioners. You have people who know the good. And so it's up to those folks who know the good to stand out and be ahead of what's going to take place and be able to say, look, this is what, to be able to describe the moment. And then also describe where we should be and how we need to get there, because we just can't just rely on these various factions out there. We got to do what you're doing, take and be at the front end and make sure we do the good, the needed, and the necessary to give the kind of balance for people of color that we need.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting, and we thank both of you all for the great commentary that you all gave today and that you all have been giving. We look forward to our next session. We thank all of those who are actually tuning in right now. So this is your brother Willie Muhammad with National Network View. See you next time.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.